There we go. Welcome to class. Tonight is portfolio optimization. There are classes coming up. So today is the 10th. There's no meeting next week because James has claimed that he is going to be sailing through the Panama Canal and he's going to have like the Panamanian influenza or something where he's going to need to just sit in the shower. I don't know. And then the week after that, he's still gone because he just is on vacation all the time. Barely does any work. And we're doing a networking event at Ryan's, the same place we did the Christmas event if you came to the Christmas party. So show up. It's a hangout. Ask any questions you want. Mingle. Find people to partner with, whatever you want to do. And then the week after that is Comparable Sales 101, where James is going to teach you how to do comps, basically. So in 2 hours, he'll teach you everything you need to know. Is that right?
Yes, for that, related to comps.
Yeah, so if you don't know how to do comps, someone says, hey, what do you think this property is worth? And you don't have a systematic way to figure it out within a very small range, a few $1,000s, that's a class you won't want to miss. And then the week after that, which takes us into February, is self-directed IRAs and self-directed 401ks. I'll be teaching that class, and that is basically ways to invest utilizing those things, how to open the account, how to transfer money, kind of everything that you need to know to invest. And there's some really creative and unique investing strategies that you can use when using a self-directed IRA and 401k. And there's also a long list of no-nos to avoid so that the IRS doesn't come and say, yeah, you violated this, so we're just going to take your IRA from you, which would be a very bad thing. Anything you want to add to those?
Nope.
Still don't show up here next week. You'll be alone, and this room will be dark. Or there'll be some other meeting here, and you can join that one, but it won't be us. So, like I said, tonight is portfolio optimization, which is a huge topic. We could probably spend a lot of nights talking about it. But let's do introductions first. So introduce yourself and why you're here. You're here to have come see class, but like what you do in real estate. And then the question of the night is, what is your end goal in real estate in terms of properties owned and generating X dollars in cash flow per month? And I'd like you to be serious about that question because you're going to utilize it a little later in class. So don't just be like, I want $1 million a month and 3 million properties. So I gave you some examples. Hey, I want to own 20 single-family homes in northern Colorado, and I want to have at least 5K of cash flow per month. So, James, I know you always want to start. You just moved over there so you wouldn't have to.
I do want to start.
Perfect. You can start.
So I'm James Orr. I'm here to find out what I need to add to the new Nomad calculator software that we're writing. That's basically going to be portfolio optimization. It's going to test all the different scenarios for portfolio stuff. And then question of the night, what is my end goal in real estate in terms of properties? So Tammy and I have this discussion quite a bit, actually, more often than you might imagine. And it's probably somewhere between 10 free and clear and 20 free and clear single-family homes and then some apartment stuff. And then the amount of income, we want to have at least $100,000 a year coming in from the free and clear real estate passively.
Cool. Nick.
How do I follow that up?
You want me to go over there? You want me to go to Tammy? Sames.
I'm Nick. I'm a nomad investor, I guess. 2 years into it, so I got 2 properties. Hadn't thought totally long term, but the 10 that you can have for my 10 slots, and probably pretty close to enough to just retire and not be in the rat race anymore.
Yeah, so really key is like, what is that amount, right? What is it that it takes to retire, right? Is that 5K a month? Is it 10K a month? Is it 20K a month, right? Getting specific, this is almost like a mini hot seat, right? Maybe we should do mini hot seats for everybody in the room during introductions one night and just pretend like it's a different class and then be like, sorry, it's actually mini hot seats. Yeah. But I mean, think deeper, like as we go through this class, think deeper and go home and do that because it's important to know where you're aiming, right? If you don't know where you're aiming, it's really hard to get there. So, Alex.
So I'm Alex, and I just recently graduated, so I come to these classes to kind of get my foot in the door.
December? Graduation?
Last January.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit ago, but so yeah, I'm just trying to educate myself to not go into it completely blind and just reading off different books because you guys specify specifically in the northern Colorado market, so that's very, I appreciate that. And the end goal for me, kind of far away, but if I'm making a decent living off of it, or supplementing whatever I'm doing at the time, so maybe build my 10 slots and 60,000 as of now, you know, start small, but hopefully something big.
Cool. 60K a year
Yeah,
minimum.
60K a year.
Cool. Elijah.
My name's Elijah, and I'm really just here to learn everything and anything I can about real estate.
About anything and anything you can.
Every
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
like I'm each week regardless of what the
Yeah.
topic is, so, yeah. My end goal probably be a mix between single and even small multi. You know, maybe fourplex, stuff like that. I would like to see 250 a year.
250K a year.
Yeah.
Nice. I like it. Brent.
Brent, and why am I here? Just to gain knowledge on investing in real estate. End goal, 10 properties, probably 5 single family and under the multifamily, and then 75 to 80 a year.
Cool. K or million?
Well,
You gotta be specific. Sometimes I'll miss it. They'll be like, 20 this, and then it's like, oh, you meant million because you're buying an island. We don't have our island buyer here tonight. Where's Doug? Doug.
That's who it was. It was Doug.
Yeah. Because Doug usually sits right here when we have a class where we ask this question. He's like, I need enough to buy an island, right? And so whatever that is, that's 75 million. I don't know. Easy.
Today's going to tell you, if you're going to dream, you might as well dream big.
Which I agree. Like you might.
Who's telling you?
It's going to be much easier to get to 30 million if you're aiming for 75 million than it is for 10K a month,
That's right.
right? So, Caroline.
All right. I'm new to real estate. I took some classes, some very intense classes that whet my appetite. So I found James's group, and it's been very educational. So I'm here to learn as much as I can. I'm sure, like everybody else. One thing I do want to learn is how to keep more of the money in my own pocket from the rentals that I make. I'd like to do 3 flips this year, just because I'm new, and 3 is about an average that I can handle. I have 1 in California, and I'd like to get 3 here in Colorado. So 8K a month, or 8,000 a month would be kind of the goal I'm looking for right now.
Cool. And you have a flip in California or a rental?
It's a rental.
Okay. I was like, man, flipping in California from here? That's
No,
awesome.
I wish I had if I was smart.
Yeah. Buy them in like 1980 and sell them
Oh, I
in
did,
2000. Yeah.
moving with them.
Tammy.
I'm Tammy,
Say.
James' wife, real estate broker, et cetera. And as James said, 10 to 20 pretty clear single-family homes, maybe some partnership things with apartments, larger stuff. But yeah, 100K in passive.
That'll
As he said.
that'll handle his Qdoba budget.
That'll handle his Qdoba budget, yeah. He can have an unlimited Qdoba budget.
Does that handle
Maybe
summer
some-
golfing too? Is that included
I
in that
think so,
100K?
yeah. I think
Okay.
that'll handle your guys' goals.
Otherwise, you need 101K a year. Daphne.
I'm Daphne. I am here to learn as much as I can about real estate. Currently, I'm doing the Nomads. I'd like to own 10 properties per year and go up from there. Free and clear, 300K a year is kind of my goal.
Nice. I like it. Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm just trying to learn anything I can. I'm just starting to get into the market, so anything I can learn is always good. And honestly, right now the goal is to just get 5 properties and just get stable, positive income. So.
Perfect. Yeah. Awesome.
Hello everyone, my name is Cameron Belknap.
He's back.
I'm back, yeah. I'm a senior actually at CSU right now, and I'll be moving to Littleton after I graduate. I'm really looking to buy my first house within the first couple of months when I'm down there. Probably end game would be, I don't know what the numbers would look like, but around $250,000 to $200,000 passive income a year. Probably more commercial and multifamily, moving away from single family, but that's the plan.
Nice. Why are you going to Littleton?
Actually, I got a job there, so that's where I'll work.
Wow.
Nice.
Good job already.
Congrats.
Very cool.
Where's JC tonight?
I know. You
Did you record that?
recorded it.
Yeah. He's graduating in May. You're graduating in May, right?
Yeah, I'm graduating May.
Yeah, he's graduating in May, JC, and he has a job already. You have him listen to that mark around 6:13. Yeah. Hello.
Hi, my name's Melissa, and I'm here to get more educated on anything that has to do with investing.
Awesome.
And my end goal is to, within 10 years, buy a bunch of multifamily get 20,000 a month
Awesome.
in passive income.
I like it. Denise?
Take 10,000 a month.
10K a month next.
I already have the 10. I'd like to have some more multifamily. I'm just having fun doing it. So,
Nice. That's always good, right? I mean, if you can come to class and you're having fun doing it, it's easier to get up and do it.
I'm starting to get really old, so I forgot everything you told me last time we taught this.
Oh, that's okay. I had to refresh myself too. I was like, what did I teach last time? So, Joe.
My name's Joe. I'm here for staying focused. It's easy to get wrapped up with life and day-to-day work and everything else, so keep coming to the meetings more often and keep what's important in front of me. Question tonight is end goal. I'd say 200 multifamily units, so 20K a month, something like that. My end goal.
Cool.
So.
I like it. Scott, back to the back row.
My name is Scott, carpenter. I've been in the mortgage business all my life. It's afforded me to be able to get enough units, I think, so I'm kind of focused now on just keeping the foundational strong and paying them all off and getting to that income. It's interesting to hear how many people's goals are up there. That's pretty good, you know, but even after all those years, I'm in here to learn more. I know a lot of folks here that are investment properties, and you guys are good at it, so I'm here to learn.
Cool. Thanks. I mean, to that point, I mean, this is why James and I come to each other's classes, besides the fact that I'm not a realtor and he has to unlock the door. But he can send, you know, he can send, I know, that's what I'm saying, but he could send Tammy to like unlock the door. You could totally ignore me. But like we both learn stuff, right? I mean, you know, we're both experts in different areas, but we still learn stuff from each other by coming to class and talking. That's why we talk so much anyway. But Curtis.
I'm Curtis. Tonight I'm here to learn how to spell portfolio.
Did I misspell it? That just made me nervous. I probably misspelled it.
I guess for right now my end goal is to get through purchasing my first property.
Cool. You got something under contract?
No.
Oh, that was like I'm getting through it. Like I've got it under contract. Awesome. What's your end goal of homes and dollars? Do you have one?
The one class that I attended where we went through the whole exercise about
Lifestyle?
lifestyle. I think when I went through that, my end goal was to make 40 grand per month.
Awesome.
But I'm
Baller lifestyle. I like it.
first steps first.
Perfect. Awesome. Welcome. Hello.
Hi, my name is Karen. I'm his wife, and I think for me is my end goal is trying to live comfortably, and also hopefully help Curtis out with early retirement if he can, and not do what he does.
Awesome. Chad, I love your shirt. I miss In-N-Out from when I was in Vegas.
Yeah, I had a lot of people talking about the Colorado Springs.
I saw that. We're going to Colorado Springs for a meetup for NCREG, dude. In-N-Out Burger, here we come. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. My name is Chad. I come here. I would like to learn more about real estate and maybe get a mentor to help me learn more down the road on how to acquire some properties. I worked at a CPA firm. I help clients help their asset protection. So I'm good on the asset protection side. I just would like to learn more about acquiring the properties and motivation and negotiation techniques, things like that.
Awesome.
Ultimately, I would like to own at least 30 different properties, probably a lot of commercial properties as well. 15 in Colorado, 15 in Arizona.
Awesome. That's awesomely specific. I like it. Yeah. Hello? Randy? Is that what it says?
Yes.
Awesome.
So I'm Randy. I'm super new to real estate investing. I don't know anything yet. I didn't know I could shoot that high every month. Wow. I just don't want to have to go back to work. So I really just want to do one or two to start with and then grow from there.
Awesome. Perfect. Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob. I'm sort of just
getting started as well, hoping to buy my first house in either April or May of this year, so excited about that. I'm here to learn, of course, like everyone else. So I haven't actually done it yet, so I don't know how much I'll like it, so I can't say what the end goal is, but if I get in it and if it's fun and everything and I'm into it, then maybe $1 million a year in total rental income.
Nice. I like it. Hello?
Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I've been coming off and on over the last couple of years. I've learned a lot from you all, and I have some short-term and long-term rentals. And I would have to say my goal is to have enough, similar to you, mine is to have enough passive income to just to support myself. And this year I would really like to learn more about partnering with others so that I can passively be involved in earning some income through real estate without having to do the hands-on landlord stuff.
Get a property manager. You don't even have to do that. So we do have partnership classes on the schedule coming up, both a partnership workshop, which is where we actively negotiate partnerships in the room for real. It's an actual real partnership. And then the class before that, that's like 2 weeks before, is like a discussion in large about partnerships where we just teach from the front of the room. So those are coming up, I think, in late February, March. They're on the calendar. So yeah, make sure you get to those because those are a lot of fun too. So Brian.
Hey, my name is Brian. I am here because I love learning about real estate and love geeking out with people who also like geeking out on real estate. Most people's eyes just glaze over when you start talking about it. My end goal, we'll shoot for $20K a month in income, passive income.
Nice. How many houses? How many properties?
How many properties? Oh, based on my current holdings, a lot.
Fair enough. Awesome. Hello.
Hey, I'm Sean. I've got one buy and hold right now. Looking to maybe start nomading in the future. It's end goal. I'm not gonna call it an end goal, but it's a point where I can quit the 9 to 5, be about 8 to 10K a month, and that would completely replace all that and provide some extra. And then I could continue growing it from there. There really is no end at any point. It's just at what point do I become full-time real estate and drop the paycheck?
Yeah. Awesome. Dan.
My name is Dan, and I really enjoy listening to both of these guys. That, if you're new here, this is the best place to learn about starting investing.
Where's my wallet? I don't have my wallet. There's another $100.
It's very honest opinion. My short-term goal is, a lot of the properties have appreciated a lot recently. Short-term goal is access the equity of the properties on a flexible manner rather than just, cash out refi. And my long-term goal is just to put a number in 25, 30K a month would be very comfortable lifestyle for what we want to do, and having properties in places that we want to go to, like investment property at the beach and the mountains and so forth. So that's the idea.
Awesome. Steph.
Invest and have fun at the same place.
There you go.
I'm Steph. We started coming at the end of last year, so just looking forward to seeing it through the whole year. Also got pre-approved yesterday, so we're excited working with James. So
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah, and the goal, I want to have a really just nice diversified portfolio, maybe not all within Colorado, but I'm in property management right now, so it'd be nice to manage my own properties and not have to be on somebody else's schedule. So
Yeah, for sure. Hello.
My name's Scott. I'm pretty much with her on most of what she said. I think we're also trying to find time to be able to have that cash flow while we're traveling, explore the world a little bit. My end goal has always been, though, to own an island that I'll call Scotland
Yeah. Two island owners now in Encraig. That's awesome. I like the naming. It's already planned out. Oh man, that's great. How much is that going to cost?
I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Isn't there an HGTV show called Island Hunters? You should be watching that, man. They're like buying islands. They're cheap sometimes.
Depends where I want to go to. Do I want to go north or?
Yeah.
I have looked at it.
The island covered in snakes and dense like vegetation.
Yeah.
You know.
It's the island made of ice that's gonna melt. Yeah. 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 Hello?
Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm here because I like learning more about real estate all the time and networking with folks. And I'd say my goal is probably $30,000 a month in income. I can't say exactly how many units I would comprise exactly.
Cool. Josh?
Josh, I'm here because it's what I do on Wednesdays.
There's no place else open. This is the only place I could go.
As far as end goal, after enough income to leave your job, it's all kind of icing on that. But I'd like to build up enough single family and kind of parlay that into some larger multifamily.
Cool. Brandon, saw you sneaking in.
Yeah, I'm Brendan Foster, buy and hold investor in Northern Colorado, and I like to be here because I continue to gain knowledge and relationships that help me grow. I don't know if I have like a clear end goal, but like 30K and the fewer number of properties, the better.
One giant house that makes $30,000 in cash flow a month. So I'm Brian Williams. I here because I'm teaching. It's what I do on Wednesday nights. I teach or I listen to James teach and harass him. He does the same thing on alternate weeks. For me, I also don't necessarily care about the number of properties. I would like to keep it to be as small as possible, but I'm also willing to go big. I think for me, it's probably in the 50 to 60K a month range. And I heard a lot of people with different ranges. And the one thing that I'll encourage you is, if you're only, I'm not sure I want to draw on this board after what we saw James have to do, but, if you're aiming at 5K a month, right, and you're thinking, oh yeah, I'll get to 5K and then I'll get more, the things you're doing to get to 5K are the things that are going to get you to somewhere between 0 and 5K in most instances, right? The things you're doing here are never going to get you to 50K. So really think about where do you want to end up long term, even if it's 20 years down the road, right? Or 30 years down the road. Because getting to here, you may make mistakes that you would, if you're like, hey, I'm going for 50K, you would have changed how you got to your first 5K. So think about where you want to end up. I can't stress that enough because it just changes what you do. So anything you want to add?
Yeah, there's definitely conflicting viewpoints on that. Some people argue you do the stepping stone model and you kind of achieve the smaller goal.
Yeah.
You kind of build. And Brian is right though. In some goal setting structures, the idea is set the huge goal because the activities you take for trying to hit a 50K a month income number versus a 5K are vastly different. I mean, you don't need to look at single family homes if you're trying to hit 50K. You're looking at more larger multifamily,
Sure.
and you're doing commercial deals, and you learn different things, and so it's pretty interesting to see the differences.
And so now to contradict myself, the way I got started in real estate was I was like, hey, I want to have my mortgage payment on my house paid by cash flow, right? It was like, that was my first goal. And I had just started learning about real estate again after having been around it growing up. But I got there and then I went, okay, well now let's just add all the rest of the bills. And then it was, okay, let's just have as much as possible. And then it became, okay, how do we not just go from 2K to 3K? How do we go to 20K, right? And make a bigger dent. So
it's interesting. I'll say one more point about that.
Sure.
And that is, I am much more of the smaller stair-stepping approach model, both what I do personally and what I teach. And I think you have proven that you do the more stair-stepping sort of thing, although you are definitely taking bigger goals now than you did early on.
yeah, but you also have to, like, if you think back to the conversation in your green puffy coat outside of whatever that was, right? I wasn't telling you I was going to buy one house.
That's true.
Right?
But it's a 5K number. That was
Yeah.
more of a 5K
But
number.
to me, that was like a 50K number now, right?
Right.
So
And now you're taking those steps to do the 50K.
yeah. So whatever works for you, just don't think about it both ways, I guess is the moral of that story. And if you're sitting in here and this is your first time in class, or you've never heard anyone say what their monthly cash flow goal is, and you're like, holy shit, someone just said 100K a month, don't freak out, right? It's totally possible, but it doesn't have to be your goal. This isn't a competition, right? It doesn't matter if you've got 10K and you're happy, right? That's totally good. James and Tammy are laughing because I'm like the most competitive person they know,
It's not
right?
a competition except between Ryan and me. Everyone else is outside the competition, but Ryan and I have this like crazy competition they go.
But I mean, you could totally be happy with 5K a month, and that's enough for you, and that's totally fine, right? One of the other things that's not in this presentation that I'll mention is that for those of you that said, hey, 3K or 5K or even up to 10K, that's great. That's supporting you and your lifestyle. What happens when one of your friends gets sick and has cancer and you need to help, you wish you could help pay for that, right? So those are the things where, don't think about this as a greed thing. It's not about that. It's about what can you then take that money and do that's good. So that's a whole other presentation. So I don't know when that is, which leads right to my next slide, which is when is enough actually enough, right? So take the goal that you guys just stated, try and put a number associated with that, right? And today, right, that's going to seem like, hey, if I had 5K today coming in, that's about what I make a month at my 9-to-5 job, I would totally quit. Chances are high you wouldn't quit, right? Chances are high you'd continue to work that 9-to-5 because now you've got 10K a month in income, and that seems amazing, right? And then you start spending more, and then you need 10K a month in passive income. So control your budget. But when you actually get there, is it going to be enough, right? For most people, the answer is no, especially in the lower numbers, I think. And James and I have this discussion that, even at 50K or 100K a month, depending on your personality and your lifestyle, you may fill 50K a month and be like, hey, I'm at 50, I can get to 200, let's go, right? So think about that. And how are you going to know it's enough? What if you get sick? What if insurance laws change? What if tax laws change, right? This is a really difficult question in life. This is why financial planners exist, to take your money to tell you that 93% chance you are going to be okay when you're 62, right? Good luck. I mean, what's the reality of that? Sorry if there's any financial planners in here. Just totally ruined your career. So, like I said, if you've got 5K, 10K seems awesome. When you get to 10K, 20K is not that far away. I already got to 10K. I can get to 20K, right? And then you're like, oh, my house payment's only $1,000 a month, but I could buy that nicer house and it'd be $4,000 a month, and so on, right? So, and then it becomes necessary. Right? And this is a trap that a lot of people fall into, and it's what I was taught when I was growing up. Go to school, get a good job, get a promotion, buy a house, right? And then what? Then you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, you're going to need a bigger house, you're going to need a better car, and you just spend more and more and more, and you never really catch up. So is 50K a month enough to handle anything that comes at you? And for a lot of people in here, right, you might be like, oh my God, yes. But then if you had 50K a month, you might be like, oh, I can't afford my private jet yet, and I don't have Scotland too. Right? You just aren't there, right? He's got to have like a zero behind that, like 500K a month. And then he's going to get sued by Scotland, so all bets are off, right? Right? And honestly, some people just may never stop, right? Because they enjoy it. If you're having fun doing it, when Rob figures out this is the best thing he's ever done in his life, he's going to be like, this is amazing. I'm never stopping. I have $2 million in cash flow a month, and I'm going to keep going, right? So you don't want your money to run out. But over time, you might change how much effort you really want to put into it, right? I don't want to have 50K a month and have a 80-hour-a-week job. That sounds horrible to me, right? I'd much rather have a 3-hour-a-week job and have 40K. So think about that. I'm out of breath. I'm so excited. It used to happen when I played trumpet. Any trumpet players in here? Yeah, like you inhale when you like go to play, and then like sometimes you don't play enough, and then pretty soon you're like, you just have to stop and breathe out. It's horrible because your conductor is like, keep going. So typical real estate path, right? A lot of people show up here and they're like, this is my 5-minute rant on the path, right? They show up here and they're like, hey, I want to do wholesale, right? Bird Dog is kind of like, hey, I've got this lead. I haven't really done anything with it. If you buy the house, give me $500. And he's like, awesome, I'll go work it. If it works out, he pays me $500. If not, it's nobody gets any money, right? It's a dead lead. So $500 is a typical fee you might get for a Bird Dog, but a lot of people come in and they're like, hey, I want to do wholesale. And why do they want to do wholesale? What's the typical reason?
No cash.
No cash. Perfect. Huh? It's quick. It's easy, right? This is what all the infomercials will say. James is like, yeah, facepalm, right? It's not easy, right? So what do people want to do wholesale to build their money to do? Not buy and hold yet, but they usually want to do something in between. Fix and flip, right? Why do they want to do fix and flips? Because it's like wholesale kind of on the next level, right? You go find one deal, you fix it up, and instead of making, you know, 3 to 10K per deal on a wholesale deal, which is pretty high in our current market, if you find be a really good wholesale deal if you made 10K, they want to do fix and flip, right? And they want to do that because they think, oh, I can make 30 or 40 or 50K per deal, right? The problem is wholesale's hard. It's not easy, right? You're going to have to know a ton of stuff to go out and talk to a seller to understand what their problem is, what their pain point is. How many of you guys have ever talked to a seller at all? Is it easy? Like when it's not on the market and there's not 2 agents buffering your discussion, it's not easy, right? Like you have to understand, hey, why are you selling this house? How can I make your problem solved for you such in a way that I also win, so that we both win, right? And so in that discussion, in that 2-hour meeting with the seller, you may have to know how to buy subject to, how to buy on a lease option, how to just let them rent it back and buy it later, how to give them more money than their house is actually worth. You might have to just know how to buy it as a rental or a discounted rental that you can then sell to somebody here in this room. There's a bunch of ways you can solve their problem. But if you've never done any of that before, like if you've never had a buy and hold or you've never done a lease option, it's hard to really understand the inner workings of that enough to be able to deal with the seller. So this is why when you talk to me after class and you're like, I want to do wholesale and then fix and flip and then buy and hold, I'll be like, why don't you just nomad, right? It's a lot easier.
Or nomad in parallel.
Yes.
Buy your first house, live there.
Yes.
Do the wholesaling in parallel at the same time.
Yes.
So at
right.
least you'll have one rental at the end of the year.
And I'm sure that if I walked into this classroom and James told me the same thing, with my competitive likeness, I would go and kill the wholesale market because I was like, it's not undoable, right? It's just, if you think it's going to be easy, it's not. It's difficult to go and do that. There's a lot of knowledge that you gain by doing a fix and flip, by doing a lease option, by doing a buy and hold that enables you to then go and talk to sellers and do it very well.
And here's one of the reasons why wholesale is hard in our marketplace. So we just had a listing last week come on the market. We had 50 people schedule showings, 50 people come through the open house, different people. We had 14 offers, 15 offers come in, sold for significantly above asking price. And so it's hard to find a deal that you can wholesale when the market's so hot that you've got that much demand for properties.
Right.
Now, when you find a deal, it's super easy to sell.
Right,
But
in this market.
But it's really, really hard to find the deals in this market.
Right, and you're probably spending a lot of money doing marketing to actually do it. So it's not like, hey, go find a house, I'm gonna buy, I'm gonna put under contract, then I'm gonna wholesale my contract. It's, I'm gonna go spend a bunch of money, which I didn't have in most cases, and try and get a deal. So this is the typical path, right? Buy and hold would be next. Maybe you do single family home, maybe you do duplex, because they're not really that different if you understand how to rent a single family home. It's just like 2 single family homes next to each other, sharing a wall. And then at some point you might decide, hey, I want to buy a 100-unit building or a 20-unit building or a 1,000-unit apartment complex, right? So you may stop here. You may only ever do this. You may only ever do fix and flips, for all I know. And then a lot of people will kind of get to that end point and they've got money, and so they start lending, right? And that's just another spot. So we already covered that, and we already covered that. Any questions on the real estate path or why I think certain things are hard? Awesome, you guys are quiet. This is dangerous. I'm gonna make you work now. So what is portfolio optimization? Why did you guys come to this class? It's a really vague title, right? I'm gonna optimize your portfolio. Did you all bring your portfolios? Yes. You didn't? Like, class is over, thanks for coming, right? So Merriam-Webster dictionary says the act of creating a real estate business that meets or exceeds an individual's income and lifestyle goals in the most efficient, easiest, or most enjoyable way possible, right? I get a lot of joy from doing real estate. In other words, number 1, buy real estate. Number 2, and number 3, profit, right? And if you guys don't know that reference, I'm sorry, you'll have to go look it up. But other than this being weight, right, what else should we be doing along the way? How else can we effectuate getting the income we want, the lifestyle we want, and having it be enjoyable? So that's what this class is about. And I don't think this is the reference. This is the underwear gnome reference.
It is.
Okay, it's not the other reference that you're thinking of.
No. Yes.
Yeah. And how do we think about what we already have in our portfolio? So here's my reiterated have a plan and update often, right? If you don't have a plan and you're not updating your goals and you aren't looking ahead at, hey, I want 5K or 10K or 20K, and here's where I'm at, here's what I'm saving a year, here's what I'm going to buy my next property, it's really hard to do any portfolio optimization, right? Because you don't know where you're going. You can't optimize anything if you don't know where you're heading. But we're not covering that at all tonight. I just covered it because that's like 3 other classes. So, quick thoughts to get you started. What lifestyle do you want? We kind of covered these earlier. What income does that require? If you want an island, you need a lot of income. If you don't want an island and you just don't want to work 9 to 5 and you want the same exact income and you're happy with your current lifestyle, there's your number, right? Do you ever want to go on vacation, right? If you're in a job and you're like, yeah, my job pays me 5K a month and you never go on vacation, and then you're like, oh, I've got 5K of passive income, and now you're like, I'm going on vacation. You don't have enough money, right? So think about what your lifestyle needs to look like and what level of work. How much involvement do you want to have? Do you want to be spending 40 hours a week or 5 hours a week? What goals do you need to do and reach to create that lifestyle? So, like I said, if you don't have those, this class is going to be difficult. Warning, this is a work of art. Optimizing a portfolio, there is no black and white answer. Like if you brought me your portfolio and then brought it to James and brought it to Tammy, you'd get 3 vastly different answers, right? Well, Tammy may just give James his answer, so maybe it'd be 2. I'm not sure. Because Tammy does all the work according to the newsletter.
Hey, that is not true.
Well, you thought you did all the work. Yeah. So it's impossible to cover everything in one class. There's no one perfect formula for this, right? It really depends on your goals, how much you own, what your current financing is, anywhere from interest rate to whether it balloons or not, when you're going to need to refinance, whether it's in a partnership, what the age and condition of the property is, how many properties you want to own, if that's actually an important number to you, right? How much money you have, I think I already said that, and what's your earning power. Like, if you have $100,000 and that's all you have and you have 0 earning power, it's a much different situation than having $100,000 and earning an extra $100K a year. How much credit you have, what your credit looks like, potential partnerships and relationships. So that's one of the benefits of this class is after class, many of you may run out the door because you're like, it's 8 o'clock, he's going over time. Totally get it. I don't care if you leave at 8 or even earlier, but there's a lot of discussions that happen between 8 and 8:30 in this room where it's building relationships about partnerships. So if you are missing out on those, stick around tonight. Tonight's goal is simply to get you to think about this puzzle, right? It's a very large puzzle for anyone. And the more properties you get, the more difficult this puzzle gets.
That's why I'm writing software for it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I added that bullet. I didn't know it was there. I was ready for the next slide. I'm like, why didn't it go to the next slide? So James is going to write some modeling software that we can input stuff, and then it will do everything we want. That's what I've been promised.
And that is exactly what's going to happen. The promise is true for once. So it is going to be crazy, like hardcore crazy for modeling all sorts of stuff.
But it won't be commented.
It will be what, sorry?
Commented.
That is true. It will not be commented for a long time.
If there's a bug, he's going to have to rewrite the whole thing. So the following story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, either living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. So, with that said, meet Jimmy O. He wants 10K a month in passive income, and pay attention here because there's about to be a class exercise. Get your pencils out and get ready to think. He wants very little work associated with his properties because he's lazy. Like I said, no coincidence, whatever. Owns 1 condo and 4 single-family homes and a duplex. He bought all of them in 2012 and 2013. That's odd. Has a 750 credit score, right? Plan was to just pay them off over time because James really wants to have, as you heard at the beginning of class. Yeah, like Jimmy O, James, it's just coincidence, right? I'm just calling Jimmy O James O, right? It doesn't say or. For the record, I tried to change the name and I couldn't come up with anything funny for at the end. I almost called you Jimmy Origami because that was the best thing I could come up with. You have a hard last name to make fun of. But the plan was to pay him off over time because Jimmy O doesn't want to have mortgages. He wants to sleep good at night. He's got the ability to save basically for a down payment for a single family home every year. If he stops eating at fancy restaurants and only eats at Qdoba. Right? Remember, any similarities are just a coincidence. So if you were Jimmy O, what would you do? And this slide doesn't give you nearly enough info, so we're going to look at, and this is specific, but I want you guys to just practice. And this isn't going to take very long, but I want you guys to actually think about what you would do. Here's what he owns. A single family home built in 1980. This is what he bought it for. This is the interest rate. This is the loan, right? Now it's worth $320, and he's got $164K left on the loan. He makes $400 a month, has $134K in equity after selling costs, right? Because the price went up a lot, right? Went up $100K. He had to put some money down. So that's how much equity he had. If he were to sell the property, he would have $134,000 he could take and do something else with. And so forth and so on. So I'm just going to go through down to here. These are the properties that he owns, right? Really good cash flow, 400, 500, 500, 200, 500, and 1,100 for a duplex, right? Stellar buys. He bought them in 2012 and 2013. They're doing really well. You can see equity-wise, he's got a bunch of equity here too. So what am I going to ask you guys to do? Let's take a look. He's got $85K now to spend. He's got $780K in equity, which means if we added all those numbers up that I just pointed at that showed what he would get in cash if he sold the properties, that's how much he would have. Currently has $3,200 a month in cash flow. What was his goal? Nope. 8. Yep. So get those pens out. Approved. He's approved for all the loans he wants to get, basically, as far as we know, right? 10 30-year fixed loans, 2 portfolio. You can do up to 4 commercial loans. So loans aren't a problem. Interest rates, James showed a slide on this last week. Interest rates are expected to continue to rise. Will they? I don't know. Will they be at 8% in a year? Probably not, right? But they're ticking up slowly. Jimmy O, James O, whatever. This is really difficult this time for some reason, right? He can sell any of his properties. He doesn't have to. He could save the money. He could pay him off, whatever he wants to do. And he could buy or 1031 into any of the following. A brand new house, $320K. It's going to take him $85K down. He's got $85K, right? Many are available, so if he wanted to, he could sell other properties and buy more. This one's going to get him $300 a month, 5% cash on cash with no management. He could buy a 4-plex in downtown Fort Collins. It's not downtown Fort Collins, it's in Fort Collins. $600,000, $150K down. This would get him 3% cash on cash, but it's managed. And he'd make $375 a month. Or he could buy an 8-plex in Loveland for $1 million. That's $250,000 down. It'd be 2% cash on cash managed at about $416 per month. Or he could do anything else, like buy Bitcoin, that you think would help him reach his goal. And so the question is, if you were Jimmy O, how would you instruct him to optimize what he has going on? I realize this is a very complicated question. I want you guys to spend 5 minutes on it, right? How would you decide what he should do to reach his goals? $8K a month, very little involvement, right? Those are the 2 key ones. So what I want you guys to do is take 5 or 10 minutes, write down what you think you would do, and I'll put the slide back up that shows the properties he can buy. And if you want me to go back and forth between that one and what he owns, let me know. But be specific. What would you do if you were him for the next year or 2? Right? What would you buy? What would you sell, if anything, and why? And are your decisions designed to give him more cash flow now or later? Right? These are some of the hard questions you're going to run into. I could buy a bunch of stuff now, and over time, rents are going to go up, and I'm going to have more cash flow later, and more equity later, and more wealth from appreciation later, or I could buy stuff for cash flow now and put more money down. So think about why you're making the decisions you're making, and if you have time, think about what you might do after that first year to get him to 10K a month, which is weird that it says 10K a month here and it said 8K a month before. So with that, I'm going to put it back up here and I'm going to let you guys, if you want the previous slide, let me know and I'll go up. Take 5 or 10 minutes, write that down. If you need a pen, you might be out of luck because they used to have a, there's a bunch here.
Would you say on the recording for the next time we do this, I'll print out the property list?
Oh, sure. Print out the property list next time we do this class. Sure. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yep. Anyone need pens?
And if you have questions, shout them out, right? This is meant to be a discussion, and for those of you that have no properties and you're like, oh my God, this is my first time, it's okay. Do your best, right? This isn't a test. It's not a passing or failing thing. It's just meant to get you thinking about what you're going to run into as you buy properties. Silence falls across the land. Yep, he's got 1 condo, 4 single-family homes, and a duplex.
And that hasn't gotten him to 8K a month?
Nah, they're all mortgaged. Yeah, so 6 of these are taken up. I'll go back to the previous slide. Here's what he currently owns. So 4 single family, 1 condo, and 1 duplex. So he's got 6 current loans.
You can do more than 10. You just have to be portfolio loans, so we're not really worried about this.
Yeah, and I said he's got 2 portfolio approved and he's got 4 commercial approved. So we assume that Jimmy O can get loans.
Yeah. He's not limited by loans.
And if he is, he'd find a way to figure it out.
Him and his spouse would share and do alternate ones or something.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Maybe even print out both of them. Like, yeah, the properties. You have 1 on each side so that we can see this working. It's a much harder problem to do, like just being exposed to it. Yeah. Well, it's hard no matter what. It'll still be hard. That's just data. Show you end result numbers, so you don't have to go and do all the manual calculations. Yeah. What happens if I pay this off? Gotta look hard.
You know, part of the reason why the new ones are cash flowing is put 25% down instead of 20. They're doing nomad. So when you do that, you do have some cash flow. Just your cash on cash return is low.
Anybody want the other slide again? They weren't supposed to do this. When you sponsor, although I'm not sure if she sponsored. They were here last week too. How's everybody doing? Harder than it looked? Sean says, nope, I'm done.
Yeah.
I think you need to sprinkle few duplexes there to get to that 8,000. I don't think we have enough parking.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a sampling of stuff he could buy, right? I mean, there's a market out there that he could go buy other stuff, right? So you could say, hey, I'm going to look for other stuff. These were just examples of stuff that he could buy, right? You're not limited, no.
Can we go back again?
Yeah. So I'll give you like a minute to wrap up. All right. Sean said this was easy, so we're going to start with him. What are you going to do? What is Jimmy O going to do? What are you going to tell him to do?
I would dump everything he's got, 1031 him in 10 of the brand new houses, gets him almost the same amount of monthly cash flow, but now he's got 10 houses appreciated.
And they're brand new.
And they're brand new, so he's got very low maintenance costs.
But he's managing them all.
Yeah, he is.
Ah, you just crushed one of his goals, right?
That's his goal, is another 10 years down the road for accomplishment. This is what gets him there.
Yeah, so how far do you want your goal to be down the road?
Is this me?
I'm just asking.
Oh, well, you were like asking, like I'm Jimmy O. You know, yeah, I mean, as soon as possible, right?
Right. Yeah, do you want to, I mean, so I totally agree. That's one great strategy, right? But it may, Jimmy O may be like, no, I'm not managing 10 properties for 10 years. That sucks. Right. So that's great, right? That's one way to look at this is if this is what your portfolio was, what would you do to meet your goals, right? And you'd be happy managing 10 of them. But so you get them to, you know, back to $3,000 a month, you're managing them all. How do you get to 8?
It says you, every 5 years or so, you sell them, roll the cash into a couple more, and just keep growing it that way with the appreciation.
Yeah. So one of the things he's got going for him, right, that I don't know if you guys caught, right? He basically, sorry, it does say 10K. I must have changed that for this presentation. His plan was to have 8K, but he wants 10K. So sorry to all those who were right and I was wrong. But he's basically somewhere in here, it says, has the ability to save 20 to 25%. So you could buy one of those every year, right? In addition. So maybe over 10 years, he buys 10 more. Maybe he partners with some people. Yeah. Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope we can turn $3,000 a month into paying him down. Dan.
I wouldn't touch any of the portfolio things very profitable. It's doing very well right now. I wouldn't touch any of the selling costs involved and all that.
This is net of selling costs, by the way.
Yeah, the 780 is net of all selling costs.
The equity is after it's all sold.
Regardless, I would get 6 duplexes similar to the one that we already have. For 20% down, there will be about 50K for a duplex that he's going to have to put down. There's 300K down payment. It has 780 in equity, so he can get out of that equity for down payment. And that will get him instantaneously into 10K a month.
So as you pull equity out of this, your cash flow is going to go quickly to 0, right? So you're taking money out of here to buy 6 duplexes at the same price that they were bought here?
No. At today's price, 285.
Okay. Yeah, so if you can find them, right? I mean, that's the challenge. I'm just giving you the challenges in our market. So you're going to buy 6 of those and...
So a couple things about that.
And
So it's hard to do duplexes at 20% down because they're 25% down loans.
Yep.
That's one thing. The equity part of it too, this is equity if you sell. If you try to go do a refi, you can only go up to 80% loan to value. So you're not going to be able to tap into a full 780.
Probably 75%.
You don't need the full 780 for this. For this, you're looking to 300, nowadays at 25, let's say 350. It's under 400.
Sure.
You have equity to do it. It's just that that's going to cost you the money of that equity. Is the one that's not going to make it go 10K.
And so you're looking at this and saying, hey, 6 of these gets me $6,600 more dollars. Add that to the 32 he's got now, you're at 10K. Right? So this is if you buy it at 218 and you're able to rent it for this, right? You're now paying 285, so you're not going to get this same cash flow. And this deal, right, if you notice, this is really out of whack for our market, right? $1,100 a month on a $218,000 purchase price, that's probably a home run for this particular Jimmy O, right? So it's going to be hard to do this. And this is where, right, and I gave you 3 slides of numbers, right? So I'm not criticizing your example. I'm just trying to give you the pitfalls is if you look at your current portfolio and you go, hey, if I just buy 6 more of those, I'd be great. This may be impossible to find another one ever, right? These are actually real properties. And this one is a home run, right? I'll never find another one like it. So, or Jimmy O won't either.
If we could find 10 of them, we'd buy 10 of them.
Yeah.
We just can't find them.
And we'd pay $285 for them all day long, too, right?
Interest rates are probably a little higher, so it's also going to hit your cash flow. It's hard to, I mean, if we could find them all, it'd be great to do, but it's going to be hard to implement that strategy.
Yeah. And so you got to look at today's market, too, and go, are we seeing duplexes come on the market? From last week's class, there's not many, right? And are we seeing them at 285? No, they're like 340, 360, right? They're a much higher price than this particular one. So it's just a trade-off, right? I think it's if you could find these, man, you get them there very quickly, right? And that's awesome. So thanks for sharing. I appreciate it. Who else? Who else wants to share what they're going to do? Josh.
Let's sell off the condo and single family built in 70. Those two, that'll give you the 250 you need for the multifamily.
The Aplex $1 million one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you lose 2 properties, but now you've got 8 doors whose rents are going up every year versus 2 doors that are going up, and get out of that arm.
Yep. So this is an adjustable rate mortgage, right? Could be a problem in the future.
And then you get rid of your oldest property, well, second oldest property.
Yep.
So you might be able to save yourself some maintenance hassle.
Yep. And the Aplex is managed, so we chopped out $700 of cash flow there, and basically we brought back $416 here. So how do we get him to 10K? Buy real estate and wait.
I can get us to 10K a month right now.
Yeah, I'll come to you last. So who else wants to go? Chad?
You can consolidate some of the loans and then use a HELOC on them?
You could do that. You could try and basically pay a couple of them off by pulling equity from another and then put a HELOC on something else. Yeah, I mean, these are the things that it's just crazy, right? There are infinite options, right? And this is what I wanted you guys to experience, because otherwise I stand up here and I teach and you guys go, this seems not so hard. I've got 3 properties. And then you start to think about, well, one actually has an adjustable rate mortgage on it. One has, it's commercial and it's got a balloon because it's a 6 unit. And so 10 years from now I have to do something with it. What if I can't get a loan then, right? I mean, there's an infinite amount of questions that we can ask, and there's an infinite amount of solutions. So you could totally do something like that, right? Lots of strategies. It just matters what you're trying to accomplish and how you're trying to get there. Anybody else want to share? No one else is like, no. James, you're up. Yeah, he's gone. There he is. So you want to get us to 10K?
You want me to get us 10K?
Sure, go.
So this is what you do. You basically sell off your entire portfolio. You buy the new construction houses that were on there, that there were plenty of them at all. And then you offer each one on a lease option. And you do 1 per month, where you get a 10K lease option fee from the tenant buyer. And that brings you your 10K per month in income. And when they start popping out, you replace them and pick up another 10K each time.
It's pretty active. So he's going to sell his entire portfolio. So he's going to have $780,000. And then basically once a month he's going to buy a new house. And he's going to, huh?
He's managing them though, right?
Yeah, but they are lease options, so once he gets the person in, it would be fine. But the front end of a lease option is much heavier, in my opinion, than a buy and hold.
I agree, but it does get you to your number.
Yeah, and so then what he's doing is he's lease optioning the property, right? I'm gonna say, hey, you want to buy this house in the future, but you can't afford to get your loan or whatever it is. Pay rent until you can afford to buy it, but I need $10K from you up front. He now gives me $10K, and I do that once a month, and I have $10K a month, right? That option fee coming in. And then I've got cash flow coming in on top of that, depreciation, appreciation, but he's getting you in a very different way to $10K a month, right? It's a lot of work to do that, but
Unlimited market for lease options.
Well, you only need 12 a year, which is a totally reasonable size market.
yeah, unless everyone in this room does it, and then maybe not. But this is just there are a lot of different ways to get you to your goal, which is why you have to have that goal and think about your plan. Yeah.
So, I mean, we're assuming he's working, right? So what is a reasonable number? I can't imagine him doing 1 a month while working full time.
Totally can.
Really?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
What about after the first year? Because the 10K comes each month, and then the second year.
Yeah, you basically have enough money to do 12 months.
I have enough to do a down payment
Once a year. So you have enough to do 13 months after a year. So he can get 10K a month for the first year. The first 3 months of the next year, he's got 10K, and then he has an issue, right? Then he hopes some of them have bought.
I do have some extra cash flow coming in, and some are going to fall out, some are going to buy. I mean,
Yep.
it's not going to be perfect.
Yep. It's going to be hard to stay at 10K a month after the first 13 months in that plan, I think.
Yeah, that's probably true.
So,
One
yeah.
thing you gotta think about though is that 10K lease option fee comes out of your equity when you sell it.
Sure.
Because it
Yeah.
basically becomes part of their down payment.
Yep.
Absolutely.
But it's cash flow for you.
So it's cash flow now, but if you spend it, you're spending down your equity. And so as the years go by, you keep doing that, you're gonna spend your equity down
No, it's going up
unless
faster
your
than
appreciation is enough to compensate.
it's going up faster than that because your appreciation is 3% a year. So
It's forced.
basically 10K a month in appreciation, 10K per year appreciation per house, and you're taking one out.
Yeah, because you're forcing it. You're saying if you're going to buy it in year 1, it's 3% higher. You're going to buy it in year 2, it's 3 more percent. Year 3, it's 3 more percent. So, yeah. So there's James's plan for Jimmy O, which is kind of funny in some way because he just planned his own stuff. All right, so let's talk about the actually things to consider for portfolio optimization. Again, the goal of that was just to make you think and go, man, this is not as straight and easy and cut and dried as you would have thought it might be. So here's some things to consider.
The more pieces you have, the more complicated it definitely becomes.
Yes, and I'm about to complicate it even more by showing you kind of all the moving pieces, right? Moving piece number 1, the property itself. Josh alluded to one of the part of the property, right? But location matters. If you have one property in Las Vegas and the rest of your properties in northern Colorado, you may not want to spend the time dealing with a manager and dealing with a handyman and all that stuff in a different town. If you've got 10 in both places, maybe you don't care. So location might matter, but location also matters is, hey, I bought in Mountain Range Shadows. I'd rather own in a nicer neighborhood in Fort Collins or Loveland, right? Upgrading to different locations, different neighborhoods that are more desirable. And this might go from selling a house that's great in an okay neighborhood to buying an average house in a great neighborhood, right? That might be a trade-off you want to make. Condition, right? What do we care about? Kitchens, bathrooms, flooring, paint, windows, doors, roof, all that stuff, right? We care. Hey, is this in good condition? Am I going to need to do a remodel in order to keep this property going? What other CapEx expenses are coming? Property layout. Why does this matter? What do we not want? Weird layout. I don't want to walk through a bedroom to get to the kitchen, right? I don't want that to be the only path to the kitchen. That's a weird layout. It's going to be obsolete. Age of the property, right? Josh said, hey, we're going to sell that property from 1970. Why? Because he doesn't want to deal with the aging of the property, right? At this point, it's already 47, 48 years old, right? In 20 more years, all the systems need to be replaced, right? Your plumbing, your electrical, they're probably going to be expensive to replace. And if you've already done all these, right, if you remodeled this house or it was remodeled right before you bought it, then maybe you don't think about it the same way because the actual age of the house, while it was built in 1940, it was really remodeled in 2008. It's really kind of built in 2008 now with all the systems were replaced. So the property is going to matter, and there's a bunch more things that matter about the property. Rentability. If this is that one property that you constantly have a hard time keeping a tenant in, or you constantly have a hard time finding a renter at market rent, because every time you advertise it, you have to drop your price to get the same quality tenant that the house next door is getting, or that the house around on the next block is getting, you may have a problem. Is it not showing well, right? Does it have good curb appeal? If you ever looked at a house with James, when you're done looking at a house, if you think you're going to buy it, at least with me, we always walk outside and we look at the house, and then we walk up and down the block and we look at the block to see, hey, if you were driving by this and it had a for rent sign in the yard, would you be like, hey, that's pretty nice? Or would you just be like, nope, right, and drive by it? So rentability. What's the pool of tenants who are going to apply to that property? And is that the tenant pool you want to be dealing with? If you have them all managed, you may not care, but even then, if you're dealing kind of at the very low end where people are barely able to pay rent and it's constantly turning over, you may not want to deal with that even with a property manager in place. Lendability. What do you think that means? Should be easy. Yeah. Are lenders eager to lend on this type of property? If it's the Teletubby dome house, right, in the middle of England or wherever it is, right? If you guys don't know Teletubbies, I'm sorry, but go look it up. You'll laugh, right? Lenders don't like those properties, right? Dome houses built into the back of the dirt. Lenders are not eager to lend on that. So if you own one of those, it's tough, right? Location, neighborhood. Is this in a floodplain? Are lenders eager to lend, up through the canyon where it flooded? Maybe, maybe not. And they have different appetites for different types of properties over time. Right now, a lot of lenders are very eager to lend on small multifamily. Not sure why. That's just what they're trying to add to their portfolios. Refiability. Can you actually pull money out later? Is that going to be easy? Is the property going to make it more difficult? And then resale. If you own a 100-unit apartment complex, who are your buyers? Other investors. If you own a single-family home, who are your other buyers? Everyone. Investors and owner-occupants. Which of those markets is bigger? Owner-occupants. Way more people live in houses than are investor houses.
Doesn't seem like that lately.
Yeah. So if you think about how many investors are there that are going to buy a 100-unit complex versus how many people are going to look at a house, like James's house the other day had 100 showings or whatever, right? A 100-unit complex, maybe getting 10 over time, months and months. So the market is much easier to sell a single-family home or even duplex, right, than it is a 5+ unit. It's also a different kind of loan, right? It's not a conventional loan, it's commercial.
Historically, it's been about 25% to a third of our investor.
Yep. So 67%, 62 to 67, I think, is the number that it fluctuates between. And that 5% is a lot in difference. But between 62 and 67% are owner-occupant of houses. Investment capital and earning power. So another factor to consider, how much money do I have and how much money can I earn, right? If you can consistently earn enough to buy more and more properties at a rapid pace, then portfolio optimization is very different. So how much do you have access to, right? Yes. So how much do you have access to, right? Lines of credit, equity, other ways to get money, right? Be thinking about more than just what's in your savings account, right? Going as far as credit cards, right? Although that's a very risky situation. Can you get personal loans? Do you have a rich uncle, right? Are they able to supply you with down payment and capital where they're willing to invest with you, right? Think outside of the box for getting to your goals. But these are all things to think about as you look at your portfolio and go, man, I need to build it to here. How do I do that? Do you have other investments you could sell? Bitcoin. If you have Bitcoin, you should sell it all right now. And if I'm right, I'll be a genius in a year. Rob's shaking his head like, nope, in a year. So if it's back at 1,500 in a year, yeah, I know. But if it's at 1,500 in a year, I'll be like, I was right. And then I'll be at 30K next year. So can you partner with other people? And then earning power, right? How much can you earn in order to help you get more loans, to help you have more down payment, and it obviously helps you save faster. Loan planning. So when you're thinking about optimizing your portfolio and thinking about how do I get to my goal, loan planning is a big deal. If you just start buying stuff randomly, hey, I bought a duplex and then I bought a condo and I've got a commercial property with a balloon loan, and then suddenly you go to your lender and they're like, yeah, we can't loan you any more money because your earning power is tapped out compared to what you have coming in. If you thought about that beforehand, you might be safe, right? So single family homes, loans 1 through 10, you could get it 15% down. Minimum credit score for that is 720. Obviously, if you're doing Nomad, you can get in for much cheaper down, technically 0 to 5%, but this is just thinking about it from the investment side. You're just buying a property, you're not going to live in it. If you want to avoid PMI, you're going to put 20% down. You can always refi later to have PMI removed, or in some cases, you can just call them up, have them come out, do appraisal, and make sure you are below the 80% loan to value, which is really more like 78, and then they can remove your PMI. 2 through 4 units, 25% down, might be 30% for some lenders. So for those of you that are lucky enough to be able to buy 2 through 4 units now where you can get them for 25% down, when I was buying mine, it was 30, and it sucked, right? So this is great, as is this, right? A couple years ago, this was 20% minimum, and then it was 25% or 30%, and in some cases even 35% for multifamily. So 25% seems like a lot, but it's a lot less than it was a few years ago. So if you can take advantage of that, and you can take advantage now, that's great. One option is to just never have more than 4 finance properties, right? This limits your down payment needed to buy the next one, right? And if there's extra cash, you're just constantly paying down or buying the rate down or paying off your other properties. Staying below 4, and there used to be a limit for 1 to 4. Your first 4 loans were slightly different than the last 6 that you could get. But this is that kind of free and clear. I can sleep at night if you're actually James and not Jimmy O, because he likes free and clear. And I think at some point, everyone will like free and clear because you don't have to worry about anything. Getting your next loan. It's not like you walk into the bank, you're like, hey, I've got 13 loans. Can you give me the 14th? Right? If you walk in and you're like, hey, I've got 3, they're much more likely to give you a 4th, as all things being equal. And paying off one of the properties might get Jimmy O or you closer to your goals faster. Rob?
So was that 4, was that picked arbitrarily, or is there something?
So the 4 was when it was 1 to 4. So last time I taught this class, which was only a year ago, this is how much it's changed, right? The first 4 loans were 20% down, and then the next 6 were 25. And so the 4 I left in there because if you just constantly pay off those 4, right, you're just churning on 4 properties and buying more. Your cash flow is much larger from a paid off property, right, and you're able to buy the next one. And the bank looks at that and goes, hey, you've got all this cash flow coming in and you don't have any real expenses going out for a mortgage. So you've got a lot more income in that case.
You have to wait to pay it off.
What do you mean? You have to wait to pay it off.
Well, I guess maybe I misunderstood you guys, but.
I just didn't understand your question.
Well, I thought you said, you go to the bank, you only have 4 loans. I guess I thought you implied that you were going to wait, say you own 4 properties, you're going to wait until at least one of them is paid off completely prior to buying your 5th?
Yeah, that would be this case. Yeah, you may choose to do that. And there's another slide that's going to use a different number than 4 coming up, and that might clear something up. So let's hang on to that. I already talked about that. So refinances, right? So this is kind of, Dan alluded to, hey, I want to pull cash out and I want to go buy some other stuff, right? So can we use cash out refis to continue to grow our portfolio? If you bought stuff in 2008 and you just sat on it and now you go back and look and you're like, man, I bought this for $200,000 and it's worth $450 today, right? You've got a lot of equity sitting there that you could take out and go do something else with. I would highly recommend that you avoid being over-leveraged. You guys can all decide what that means for you. The banks like to limit you at 75% loan to value when you're cashing out. So that's their definition of being over-leveraged. If you really wanted to go find somebody who put a second lien on the property and take more cash out, you probably can. It's probably a higher interest rate, but I would avoid leveraging to 90 or 95% just because the market's going up and you're like, oh, in a few years it'll be better, right? That becomes much more risky. I didn't know if this was still true. We don't have, is that still true? Freddie can do refinance, cash out refinances if you've got 6 or fewer loans?
When we can, it's under 70%.
When you can, it's under 7%?
70%.
Oh, yes. Gotcha. So Fannie can only do cash out up to 4. Freddie, if you've got 6 properties, they can do cash out loans up to 6. So that's fairly interesting because if you're in that 5 or 6 range, this makes a lot of sense. So there's some benefit to remaining under that amount if you're trying to do cash out. So this is one of the places where, hey, if you've only ever got 6 loans and you're buying this one, you're waiting, you buy another one, then you're like, hey, that one's worth enough, I'm going to take some cash out and buy another one, and you stay under 6 loans, you're able to cash out from a conventional loan. So that's one reason that that number 4 and 6 will still make sense. And the other way to do that is, hey, I've got a lot of properties, but I've got stuff I can move around to get under that threshold. So I've got 8 properties. I need to do cash out. I'd like to do them with Freddie because it's conventional, 30-year fixed. Can I take one of the properties that's not paid off and take some money from a commercial property I own and pay it off and have a second lien put on that property? Right? This is the art of moving money around on your properties, which becomes really useful when you've got a larger portfolio. So as an example, you could sell a property and buy a much larger property using that equity. Sorry, this isn't the same example. I'm not sure where it went. So there's an example of this where I did this. I had 12, it's probably on the next slide. I had 12 properties, and they were all kind of in the 1 to 4 unit range. And I needed to get down to 10 to do refinances. And it was like, okay, well, how am I going to do that? And I had some commercial properties as well. And so what I did was I took a second lien and I paid off one. And then I had a loan from a friend that was on one of those. And he's like, yeah, you can move it to another commercial property if you want. So I was able to move one of those loans off, get down to 10 loans, do the refinance, and then move the loans back to where they originally were. And the lender was fine with that. So that's the benefit of having properties that are either sometimes paid off. So it's like, hey, I need to get some cash to go do a down payment that I don't otherwise have. I do a cash out refi, and I can go put a down payment on this house that was amazing that James sold and buy that instead. Does that make sense? Perfect.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So let's say you're in a partnership with somebody, and you guys have an LLC that's a partnership, and you're going to go buy a house together, and that house title is going to be held in an LLC.
Okay. So like a portfolio loan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And your partner is going to sign on the loan and be the credit partner and like put some money in the deal, and the bank wants that partner obviously to sign on the loan and also the partnership LLC to sign on the loan.
Yep.
And
Typical.
As part of that partnership, you have like say 70% interest or something like that. So
Yep.
you're also sort of signing. Does that count as one of those loans?
Yeah, this question just came up. So you're not personally signing on the loan. Let's start with that. You're signing as a member of the LLC, and you're just signing for the LLC. Your partner is actually signing probably as a member of the LLC and personally, which is a huge difference. If you sign on that loan as just the LLC, it does not count for you. If you signed personally, even if it doesn't show up on your credit, you should disclose it to the bank or you are technically committing loan fraud. Yep, so when you sign personally, it matters. Yeah, Scott's going, yeah, don't commit loan fraud. Go to prison for loan fraud. Let's see. You can also sell a property, buy a much larger property using your equity and savings as rates are low, or do second liens or lines of credit, right? If you're trying to get more money, right? Hey, I've got a property, it's already 75%. James, you want to loan me up to 90% on this property?
Yes.
He says yes, excellent. James is a new lender. Talk to him after class for some money. Typically, you're not going to get 30 years fixed on a second lien, though, right? You're going to get, how long are you willing to lend it? 3 years? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Wow, it's not very useful, James. So you might get 3 years, you might get 5 years, you might get 1 year, but it's not going to be, hey, it's forever. So this creates another situation where it's like, I've now taken a second lien to do something else, but now I have to have a plan in my portfolio to come back and pay this off, or move this money elsewhere, or refinance it into one loan with a conventional loan, right? So you constantly have to be thinking about this planning as each move you make. And if you start thinking about this at the beginning, knowing where you're going, it's much easier than just getting your first, I don't know, 10 loans and then being like, hey, I could have done this way better. And that was my thought, right? After I got done with my first 10 loans was, hey, I could have done this way, way better. And I screwed a bunch of it up. So took some time to fix it. Here's the example that I just gave you, so I'm going to skip this. Basically, exactly what I said. It's the example of moving money around. Loan planning and interest rates. So interest rates obviously matter. At 3.5%, we're all super happy. Now that it's at 5, everyone's like, oh, it's at 5%, right? That's still really low, right? It's still really great. What are you going to do if rates are going up? Probably buy until cash flow doesn't make sense, right? Could probably rename this, what do you do if prices are going up? Buy until cash flow doesn't make sense, right? And that's what we're seeing in our area, right? Fort Collins, very difficult to get cash flow, right? And then save longer and buy your next property, and maybe you put more down, or maybe you wait until you can buy it free and clear, right? If you put 40% down on a house in Fort Collins, you probably have some cash flow, right? If you're putting 20% down, you may not today. Do you have something?
What does buy until cash flow doesn't make sense mean to you? Because it means something different to everybody. Like, what's your normal criteria, or what you recommend other people?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's got multiple answers, right? In the way this is written, it was, hey, until cash flow doesn't make sense. If you're looking for at least 5% cash on cash return, and maybe you're not willing to accept less than that, that's where you stop buying or save more to put more down. There are some people, though, who don't need the cash flow, and they want to buy the property to either fill the loan spot, right, to get the benefit of having a property be leveraged, and then they know rents are going to go up over time, the house is going to go up in price over time, and so they're taking advantage of buying that house while the interest rate is low. They don't need the cash flow, and they may be willing to accept, you know, -2 or 3% or -5% cash on cash and feed the property for a couple years until it comes up. So it varies depending on where you are. There's no one answer, just like there is no one answer for any of this. It's all individualized situations. And there's a small group of us that have had this discussion about, should we be going out and buying houses in Fort Collins at 0% cash on cash? Because 5 years from now, we're all going to look back, just like we did 5 years ago, and we went, hey, in 2013, I wish I would have bought everything I could have bought, right? And now prices are higher, and you're looking at it going, doesn't make sense. You know, I used to stress out about buying a $225,000 house. I'm like, it's listed for $230,000. If I can get it for $225,000, I'd buy it. But at $230,000, I'm not buying it, right? That's ridiculous, right? Like, it's crazy. Now it's like, hey, can you get it for under $300,000? So, or sell that property and use the equity to buy bigger properties free and clear. You could also pay off your other mortgages and wait for rates to come down, right? This is what happens again as rates are going up. You know, if rates went to 10% tomorrow, everything in Fort Collins and Loveland would be 0 or negative cash flow, right? Almost. And so it'd be very difficult to buy. So what do you do with the income that's coming in the meantime? These are just examples. What do you do if interest rates are going down? You guys tell me. Refinance. What else? Buy more properties. Yeah, refinance old properties, consider taking cash out. Or maybe you should refresh your portfolio at this point with newer properties. Get rid of the 1960, get rid of the 1970, and go get a 30-year fixed loan on a new house or 10 new houses, right? Sell and use all that equity to go buy something bigger. Instead of having 20 single-family homes, let's have 2 20-unit apartment complexes, right? These are the things that you got to think about. What do you want to manage? How much do you want to own? Do you want 20 addresses? Do you want 2? Very interesting discussion. Or go buy new properties with financing, right? Go buy as many as you can. If rates are at 3.5 and prices are coming down, how many of you wish you would have bought every $250,000 house in Fort Collins in 2013? Right? I mean, there are houses that I was being so picky in 2013. It's like, this one's not quite good enough. Jeez. Totally better. No doubt. I'm going to cough for a
I'll
while.
make a comment while Brian's grabbing something to drink. So if you're
10 single-family homes, your buyer pool is bigger. And so in a market like this, you get the advantage of, hey, I just got, 50 showings. Where, in a 1 to 4 unit, you're going to get that. But for a 100 unit or a 50 unit, I don't know that you're going to get that unless you're priced really aggressively.
No, like for like 16 or 20, $2.5 worth.
Yeah, even that, right? I think.
And this is my hold, it's the last one, I'm planning,
Yeah. What do you think?
I don't know. I think there's more factors involved. I think
Sure.
part of the discussion tonight about portfolio optimization comes into play. The financing on those big multifamilies is very different. I think that market cycles probably impact those very differently than you see on single-family homes. But there's definitely an ease of management component to having the larger single unit that you're managing that thing. But then there's also an increased risk. I mean, if that one neighborhood goes bad or that unit goes bad, you end up dealing with some of that.
And your turnover is probably slightly higher in the multifamily too, right? I mean, there are definitely people living in a multifamily that have been there 20 plus years, but that's rare. So.
And then you have shared maintenance, shoveling and sidewalks and lawn care. I mean, those are added expenses to those larger multi-units. Insurance.
Yeah, but in the single family, they do that.
Yeah.
They mow the yard, they shovel the walk, right?
Common areas.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some interesting side things to the multifamily.
Yeah.
It's more complicated than you think at the surface.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one. Buy both.
Yeah, that's my
Loan type matters, right? Do you have a fixed rate 30-year loan, or do you have a 5-year balloon loan, right? So this is amazing when rates are low and you lock it in for 30 years. Anyone who locked their rate at 3.25 or 3.5 or anything like that, and you're locked in for 30 years, the chances that you refinance that, like you're gonna always look at that and go, oh, it's 3.5. Like now it's 5.5. I can pull $300,000 out, but it's 3.5, right? You're gonna have a problem mentally refinancing that. But are you gonna hold it for 30 years, right? A lot of people, how many of you guys bought your first house and thought, I'm gonna live here forever? Oh man, how come I'm the only one with my hand up? Well, I thought I'd be there at least 20 years, right? 5 years later, I moved out. The next house, I got smarter, and I was like, I'm gonna be here for at least 10. Was there for 5. Should have learned my lesson. So the next time I thought, I'm gonna be in this house for 5 years. Was there 3. So stuff just doesn't work the way. And then the next time I was like, I'm gonna be here 5 years, and I've been there longer than that. So I'm going the other way now. Adjustable mortgages, right? 5, 7, and sometimes 10-year, and then it starts adjusting. These are great for lease options. They're great for shorter-term holds, but if you've got them on your longer-term holds, your rate's going to adjust. That's a risk. Do you want to get rid of that risk? Is that part of your optimization strategy? Right? And if it doesn't sell and it's a lease option, what's your plan when the rate goes up? Right? If the rate comes down, usually it's the floor is where you bought it. So it's never going to be like, oh, I bought it at 5% and now it's at 3%. Right? The bank's like, we're smarter than that. Right? It's 5% and we can take it to 10, but the lowest it can ever be is 5. So, and what happens if the market is such that you can't refinance that property at that point? And it's losing you too much money, and now you have to sell the property at a loss. Right? So this is the loan risk, right? Got to factor that in. If you're refreshing your inventory every 10 years, what is this? This is probably a James bullet that he asked me to put in. I just read it, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. So James likes to say, hey, go refresh your inventory, right? And this is basically saying rates are typically slightly lower versus 30-year fixed. Oh, so the ARMs. Yeah, so if you're refreshing and you're just getting a 10-year ARM and then you're selling every 10 years, your rates for the ARMs are going to be slightly lower. Except when the rates were really, really low, they were basically the same, right? The banks only went so low. And then creative financing, subject to owner financing, right? If stuff goes bad and the owner's getting his check every month from you and you're like, hey, I can't sell the property, it's a bad market, they're more likely to work with you. So think about all these things depending on what types of loans you have in your portfolio, but really plan for this. This is one of those where you can go, hey, I know what an adjustable rate is. If it's 7 years, this is my risk tolerance. So think about your loan types. Let's think about it some more, apparently. Fixed or adjustable with a balloon. So a lot of the commercial loans that you're going to encounter, right, it's a 7-year, 10-year, sometimes 12-year, but it balloons. So in 10 years, you owe the remaining balance. On a commercial property, what happens if you can't refinance that? Bank wants their money. What are you going to do? Sell it when the market's down? Like, that sucks. So what's your contingency plan for that? Do you have other properties that you can pull the money from, pay that off for a few years, and then cash out, refinance it later? These are things to think about as you buy commercial properties with balloon loans. James has a saying about balloons. Yeah. And real estate investors. Not all commercial loans are like that. Some of the commercial loans are, it's fixed for 10 years and then it adjusts once every year for the next 10 years and it's a 20-year fixed loan. But still, now you're on a 20-year cycle, not a 30-year cycle. So just be aware of that. A lot of these also have a prepayment penalty. So you thought, oh, well, the market went way up. I'm going to just refinance this 7 years in and take some of the money out and get a new loan, so I've got another 10-year period. You're probably paying a prepayment penalty on that commercial loan. So take that into account as well. And they work in a bunch of different ways. The most common is a step down where it's 5% of the remaining loan balance is your penalty for the first year, second year, and then 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1 on a 10-year loan. There's another way to factor it, but the formula, if you were here last week, it was basically about as big as the Williams, whatever you call that formula, the Williams score for the market. You've got interest rate risk here too. A lot of these are adjustable. You've got market risk, which we talked about. Can you refinance it? And then we come to private and hard money. Comes in all shapes and sizes. James is willing to loan for 2 weeks, probably with 10 points. And what's your interest rate?
It's actually not 10 points. It's 3 points and 12%.
Nice. That's expensive money for 2 weeks, right? Most of these are shorter and they're balloons, right? Typically it's meant for fix and flips, but like I have private money on some loans and it's a 5-year term or a 6-year term and I can pay it off after 1 year. So a lot of these risks are the same as up here with the balloons. All right, we're going to just keep going on loans. I like loans. Consider what types of loans are going to help and hinder you. So this is big in the nomad world, from getting your next loan. Like if you go and you buy a property that you're feeding $600 a month and you really like the property, but hey, I only put 1% down, it's eventually going to be an amazing property, but you go to get your next loan and they're like, yeah, you've got $600 extra of expense on this. We can't give you another loan, right? Talk to your lender about this before you make that first buy. And this is to Chris's question, right? Are you a personal guarantor or is it just the LLC? If you're buying in a partnership, try not to sign personally on the loan. Find someone else to do it for you if you can, right? Figure out, talk to your lender, is it going to pull your debt to income down so much that it makes it really hard for you to get another loan? Or is it going to help you? You know, hey, I've got so much rent coming in from this property, that bottom duplex that Jimmy O owned, right? Paid $218, made $1,100 profit a month. Guarantee that's helping his debt to income ratio, right? Some of the other ones where you're buying $1 million property and you're getting $400 a month, probably pulling your debt to income ratio down. So I guess technically it's pulling your debt to income ratio up percentage-wise. I just looked at Scott and he was like, that's wrong. I could see it in his eyes. I was like, oh yeah, that's the wrong way. Does it count against your 10 loan spots? So in Chris's example, where he's got somebody signing on that loan, what they may not know is it's 1 to 4 unit. When they sign on that loan, even though it's not a conventional loan, it took one of those 10 loan spots, right? So be very, guarded about your first 10 loan spots that are conventional, or that even if you're not getting a conventional loan from Fannie or Freddie, if you sign personally on 2 portfolio loans and it's a single family home or a condo, that's 2 slots. So you got to be aware of what counts and what doesn't. You're buying commercial, they don't count. It's awesome. Go buy 5-unit buildings all day long. Doesn't count against your 1 to 10 loan spots. Leverage versus free and clear. James's probably favorite slide. James likes free and clear. Brian likes leverage. Math says leverage. Sleep says free and clear. If you want to sleep good, have your properties be free and clear, or just pay more down. So leverage is obviously great, as James has taught many times, for improving your overall return, right? If appreciation is going at 3% a year, or 10%, we'll use 3%, and you've put 20% down, you're getting what really on your money? James. 15%, right? You put 20% of the total value of the house down, which is 1/5. So the property goes from $300,000 to $309,000, and you only put 20% down. If you compare the $9,000 to what you put in on the money, you're making 15%. We just talked about that, but it's not right for everybody. Some people want to sleep better at night, and my suggestion to James is, hey, instead of having it free and clear, take some advantage and put 40 or 50% down. Still get the loan, still take advantage of the leverage, be able to sleep well at night. Maybe that works for you and maybe it doesn't. Over leveraging properties, right, is probably a bad idea. I've already said this once, I'm going to say it again. This is not in any case what we're talking about. We're talking about taking a normal loan, not trying to leverage to the hills where it's like, hey, I've got a 110% loan on this property, and then something goes wrong, and what happens? You lose the property, bad things happen, it's not any fun.
Let me give you a hard question, and that is, so is Nomad where you're putting 0 down or 1% down, is that over leveraging?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's one part of me goes, hey, you're living there, and so the first one, it's your house,
Yep.
right? Stuff goes sideways, you're in the first one.
Yep.
The second one, you're putting 5% down, in most cases, right? So, you know, I think if you are planning on holding them for 30 years,
Yep.
I don't think so,
Okay.
right? I think if you are planning on doing the lease option model, I think you need to realize there's extra risk there,
I agree with that.
right? Because I think if we look back in history, any 15-year period during real estate history, if you look at price values in most markets or just in the US overall, they've never been lower 15 years later than they were. So if you're willing to wait, real estate usually flattens out that huge curve, right? You look at Las Vegas, right? Huge dip, but big recovery, right? It was out of whack. Came back down, and now it's kind of back where it should have been. So take that into account.
So if you have a long-term horizon and you're doing Nomad, then putting a small amount down should not impact stuff. You're accepting that risk over anything short-term, there is additional risk in that short-term time horizon.
Yeah, and I think even the long term, right? This is where do you get the cash flow if you need to feed the property? If rents drop, and I have a slide in here about this, which would be really interesting to run for Nomad on what's the worst case that could happen to you. So let's bring that back up when we get there.
Sure.
So with free and clear properties, obviously if rents decline, it might be the bottom of this slide. You're still profitable, right? If the market declines and you need to sell, you're not underwater. You don't have a problem. Hey, I'm listing my property. I don't have to come to the closing table with $30K in order to sell it. Does that make sense? If you guys have questions, please ask. Higher cash flow in dollars, not in percent, right? It's 100% you paid for it. But in dollars, you're getting a lot more money. So James, one of the solution for Jimmy O might have been sell a couple of them, pay off the others, and what does cash flow look like? Maybe it's more. Or what does this lead to? Owning fewer properties, right? Brendan said this at the beginning, like I don't want to own 5,000 properties. I want to keep that number as small as possible, but still hit my goal. So here we go. Run worst case portfolio scenario. So I meet in a small group each week, and we did this as one of our exercises. Basically go and think, what's the worst thing that I think could reasonably happen in this market? So, and then adjust for that. What happens if vacancy increases to 15%? Take your portfolio, stick 15% vacancy in. Are you still above water? If not, what's your contingency plan, right? And if one of those properties is dragging you down, maybe that's one to get rid of for portfolio optimization. Another way to look at it is just plug the vacancy number in until you get to break even. And what does that look like? What happens if rents drop by 20%? Does that seem reasonable in our market? No?
Historically, it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
For the data I have, but it's possible it could.
I mean, vacancy at 15% in our market. Does that seem reasonable to anyone?
If you're willing to drop rent, I don't think you should have vacancy at 50%.
Right. So these seem unreasonable for our market, but if your portfolio supports them, that should give you some confidence, right? Part of the portfolio optimization is, hey, am I going to be okay in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years? Or same thing, what's the largest rent drop you can handle? And what if both of these happen? And James just makes the point that that's unlikely. If you're willing to drop your rent, you're probably not going to have as much vacancy. But could you handle a 10% vacancy with a 15% rent drop? Right? Plug those numbers into your portfolio and find out. And then figure out what gives you nightmares and run the cases for that. So I actually ran numbers on my portfolio. This was a year ago, so it's not super up to date. But basically, just plugging in what's the vacancy I could handle before I was break even. It was 28.4% vacancy with no rent decline, which I am like, there's never, it's never going to be almost 30% vacancy in northern Colorado. And then I was like, well, what if I do 3% vacancy, which is what I normally plug in, right? I could handle a 25% rent drop before I was break even. So that gives me some confidence in my portfolio. What about 5% vacancy? 23%. So it didn't move the dial very much. And then the last one I did was, what if I just try and figure out the number that's the same for both, right? X% drop in rent and vacancy. And it turns out that number's about 14%. So vacancy could be 14%, rents could drop 14%, and I would still be break even or above. So do the analysis for your portfolio and then see if there's any outliers. Does this one property suck way worse than the rest? Why is that? Maybe it's because you just have more leverage on it. That may not be the problem. So think about those things.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like really your biggest risk is what the monthly payment is, because then that puts you more susceptible to rent fluctuations or vacancy, not so much the equity. Like you might have no equity, but you happen to have a super low interest loan and a low monthly payment versus a property where you might have a bunch of equity, but you're paying a lot of interest or you have a really high monthly mortgage payment. That
Right.
puts you more at risk, basically.
Yeah, we discovered this on the deal analysis spreadsheet. It was that big table you added to the bottom, and I think Brendan was the one who pointed out originally, is he said, you know, the sensitivity to price is really not that sensitive.
Right.
The sensitivity to the rent you have coming
Yes.
in is a huge factor.
Yep.
So you could overpay $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on a property, and it's much less sensitive than not getting $50 or $100 or $150 more a month in rent.
Yep. You hit a threshold in rent, and then pretty much every dollar above that threshold where you're break even almost goes straight to the bottom line. And that's why rent really matters, right? And once you're below that, it's like, it's just you're feeding the property. Josh.
I don't know if I'm being super nerdy here, but was the fact that those were directly inversely correlated normal, or is that just coincidence with your portfolio?
On this?
Yeah.
Or on the other numbers?
Well, all of them, 28.4 and 0, and then half and half is literally half. Like, when your vacancy is 3%, your rent decline is 25.3, which totals to 28.3.
Oh.
I think they're linear. I think that those curves would be
It
linear.
seems like they're
Yeah,
much like,
that this and this basically equals that. Yeah.
so you could have a 0% vacancy with a 28.
And I didn't stick this in and run like really precise. I modeled this in a very generic way. So that may be part of it because I'm not taking into account like every individual property's specific maintenance and specific management. I just wanted to see overall, here's what my maintenance numbers are on average, here's what management is. So I didn't do it by property where I could see it, but I'm guessing they'd be close.
It just stuck out.
Yeah.
I will run those numbers actually with you.
Perfect. Inflation. So make sure your goals take inflation into account. This is like the most odd slide. I left it in here because James is probably going to be like, yeah, I asked you to add that. But I read it and I was like, this is like misplaced in the middle of the slide deck. But 10K per month in today's dollars, right, is 12.8K in 10 years. So think about that, right? Or it's 20K per month in almost 30 years. So today's dollars, right, they're going to move. Home prices, luckily, basically inflation-proof your investment. They've been proven to keep pace with inflation, which is why if you don't leverage, right, you don't get the advantage of getting ahead of inflation. Right? It's like sticking your money in a bank account that's getting 3% and inflation is 3%. Basically, it doesn't matter how much interest you earn, it's still worth the same buying power. Whereas if you stuck your money in a bank account that was earning 15% interest versus inflation at 3%, you would get ahead. Right? That's the difference. The market and the economy. Things to think about again for portfolio optimization. Your economy. Pay attention to the macro economy. Lots of stuff going on lately, right? New tax bill, new healthcare stuff, all sorts of things going on. Pay attention to unemployment. Pay attention to interest rates. These are indicators of what's happening in the macro economy. I am nowhere near an economist. Please don't ask me questions after class about this stuff. I try to stay as far away from overall government stuff as possible, but the economy matters, right? And then local market conditions, which James gave a huge market stat presentation last week, and then I'll bring some other market conditions back. But local unemployment matters, right? Why? Because where there are jobs, what happens? People move to those places to get the jobs, right? This is one of the reasons Colorado's population is increasing. Unemployment is usually a year to a year and a half indicator ahead of the real estate market. So if you suddenly saw unemployment jump, that might be an indicator that a year to a year and a half, our real estate market will slow down. Think about that. Inventory, right? Population migration. How many people are moving in to Colorado versus moving out? Right now, there's a surplus of people moving in. And then it's important on a micro level, where are they moving to? Greeley, Fort Collins, Loveland, or are they moving all to Boulder, right? It matters where they're moving in the state. Right? Stats are harder to find on migration. I had them last year. I can bring them again if they update them, but if not, I'll bring them what they look like and what the estimates were, because they kind of do it like census. So it's not done like in-depth every year. It's more like every 5 or 10 years. But this could give you a picture of, hey, if there's a bunch of people moving in, supply is still going to be limited to the demand. Right? Demand is already super high here. Supply is still limited. Your Blink matters. How many of you guys have read Blink by Malcolm Gladwell? Everyone that didn't put their hand up, go buy the book and read it. Here's the gist. Your mind is able to gather and process data that you aren't actually able to think about and see. Your mind is constantly processing stuff, right? When you walked in, if you were new tonight and you looked at me and you were like, man, that guy is a dishonest crook, right? That was your Blink, right? It was wrong, but that was your Blink, right? that gut instinct that you feel, right, that is what the blink is. When you drive up to a property, right, and James and I's blinks are sometimes in sync and sometimes they're not. We drove up to a property in Evans. We didn't even get out of the car and we both looked at each other and went, no way. We're like, and then we were like, why do we feel this way, right? And then we walked inside and we looked at it anyway because we were there, but it was just an immediate no. Don't be afraid to listen to that blink instinct. Don't let fear overtake your blink either, right? A lot of times if it's your first property, you might be like, ooh, it's scary. That's not your blink, that's emotion. So separate the two if you can. You know, when you walk up to somebody and you meet someone new and you're like, oh, that guy, he's just not a trustworthy guy, right? That's your blink. Your brain has picked up stuff potentially that has put off that from that person, and in a lot of cases your blink is correct. Not always, but use that to make some decisions, right? Don't ignore it. Not just to make buy and sell, hey, this property is ugly or it sucks or whatever it was that our minds saw in this property, but you know, when you look at your portfolio and you go, hey, I'm going to sell that property and I'm going to take all that money and buy 7 new properties, and you go, oh, that doesn't feel right. Figure out why. Here's some things that you can ask yourself to kind of draw out how you might feel about properties, right? Do I want to own this property in 10 years, right? Why or why not? There's definitely some properties that in my portfolio, in fact, I just sold one last week, right, that I didn't want to own for 30 years, right? It wasn't meant to be. It was an older house. So if you ask me that about that, it's like, no. When you ask me that about some of my single-family homes, it's an immediate yes. When you ask me that about some of my other properties, it's like, I don't know. And so I can kind of tell which ones are in the middle. This one's a debatable one. I like to use it. Am I proud to own this property? To me, this matters because it means I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to like be proud to own it, and it's not like, oh, I don't want anyone to know I own this. You know, maybe for asset protection reasons I don't, but it's not like if I drive by with my mom, I'm not like, hey mom, don't look over there, I don't own that, right? It's like I'm not being a slumlord. I'm being proud to own it, and I'm proud that my tenants are living there and happy. Nomad. Nomad with lease options can help with portfolio optimization. It can also be more risky, like James and I discussed earlier, if you're thinking about it that way. If it meets your plan, and if it meets your goals, then Nomad's not for everybody, right? And lease options aren't for everybody.
You know what's interesting about this note about it's more risky? It's riskier because you've got a shorter time horizon, but it's less risky because you're getting money up front to help buffer you against that too. So I wonder which risk is larger in some ways. If you're getting like a buffer up front for it.
Yeah, so in our market, it's probably a fair assessment to say that that risk is pretty close to even. But there are a lot of people in the Vegas market who had lease options who probably feel like the 5 or 10 or even 25K they got up front was nowhere near what they actually experienced, right? And so it's a weird, where are you? How's your market? What's the history? How long are you gonna hold it? What's your other contingency plan, right? None of you should ever just have one exit strategy for a property, right? If it's like, hey, I'm buying this Nomad and I'm just lease optioning it and it's gonna sell in 3 years, expect something to go wrong with that. Right? Your tenant buyer walks away after 2.5 years, it doesn't sell, the market's down, you can't sell it, whatever it is, have another strategy. Chris?
I was going to say, what's the risk on that Vegas example? Did they have like an underlying loan?
So imagine if I buy a Nomad property, I live there for a year, I pay $300,000 for it in Vegas, I move out, I lease option it to you, you give me $25K, and the property drops to $150K and they walk. Am I glad I bought that Nomad property? I can't use that $25K to feed the property long enough potentially for that property to come back up to value.
If you lose out on the opportunity to sell it that you were hoping for, but you could find a tenant and rent it.
But in that case, you couldn't find a tenant, right? There were 5,000 empty homes.
Right. So but it's not really relative to just lease optioning. It's like
yes.
buying property in general.
Yes. But in this case, with Nomad, you might have had 1 to 5% down. Your payment's much larger, right? Whatever lease option fee you got, it's much harder to make that last making those payments while it's vacant.
Higher payment.
Yes. Lease optioning with Nomad does allow you to constantly refresh your inventory so you avoid the CapEx. So again, something else to think about if you're nomading, how do you think about portfolio optimization as a nomad, right? It's not just, hey, go buy 10 houses and buy whichever 10 you want. Think about how you can optimize your portfolio for whatever's important to you. You know, James has already shown you the class. He had the book up here, you know, take 3K and build your empire. Even if you're not doing Nomad, right, you can use lease options. Hey, I've got a property I don't want in my portfolio. How am I going to get rid of it? I'm going to lease option it. Perfect. Sell it for cheaper. That's all I can say for Nomad for now. James doesn't like it when I teach 2 classes in one night. And James made me put this smiley face here if you were here last week. Seriously. Talk to James about Nomad in any form or me after class 2. So, you guys remember Jimmy O? Meet less fortunate Jimmy O, right? Still wants 10K per month, still wants little work associated with the properties, still owns the same things, but guess what? He slacked off and didn't buy in 2012 and 2013. He waited till 2016. What do you think happened? Prices went up, cash flow went down, right? So now instead of having, you know, 3K or 3,200, he's got $700 a month in cash flow, right? Total. His equity is essentially what he put down after selling costs. It's only been 1 year, 1.5. I guess we're 2018 now, but 1 year since he bought them. His credit isn't nearly as good. It's a 680. So knowing what you wrote down before, right? Now you have a completely very similar, but yet suddenly very different portfolio to optimize. What changes, like what do you do differently, right? Everything matters. You don't have to do this exercise. So everyone's like, oh, we have to do this again? Crap, right? You don't have to do this, but this is just a couple of changes make all the difference, right? We suddenly went from 3,200 to 700 a month in cash flow, and we dropped his credit score, right? Everything else being the same, his portfolio optimization is going to be much different to get him towards his goal. What if he bought in 2017 and he had no cash flow, right? One simple year and one change to this, and now he's got no cash flow. He just owns a bunch of property. So think about that. Just some interesting, hey, when should I buy property? Buy real estate and wait. Don't wait to buy real estate. All right. How many of you want to own 100 homes? Come on. Somebody out there wants to own 100.
Some people may not realize the numbers they mean they need 100 homes.
Yeah. How many of you want to own 50 properties? Josh? Chris? No one else wants to own 50. 50 units. How's that? Oh, geez, I'm using the wrong word. Shit. How many of you want to own 100 units? What was the difference? 100 homes, 100 units? Fine, I get it. I know what the difference is. So here's a common scenario. Somebody wants to own 100 homes. Let's say that's $200 per door or 100 units, right? That's $20K per month. Woohoo! Right? But what do you have to handle if this is really 100 homes? 100 homes. It's 100 different locations, 100 different properties, maybe 100 different LLCs. You've got management, bookkeeping, loans, taxes. Let me tell you, doing taxes on a lot of properties is not fun. Keeping track of this is overwhelming for most people. Every time I talk to my mom on the phone, I'm talking about property, she's always like, I don't know how you keep track of it all. And I'm like, sometimes I'm not sure either. But is there an easier or better way than owning 100 homes or 100 units to achieve this same thing of 20K a month? Because a lot of people are just blindly like, I want to own 100 homes. Yes, I do, or 200, right? Sounds like a great goal. Why not? So one plan, and this comes back to Rob, your question earlier, right? The 4 units. There's one plan that's called sevens. It's basically you're only ever going to own 7 properties. So what does that look like? Have 7 properties that on average you hold for 7 years. So what are you doing every 7 years? Selling one and buying something bigger, right? So purchase 1 to 2 properties every 12 to 18 months. Do that forever until you get to 7, really. And then every time you do that, buy a larger property. So use the cash flow, use the equity, use the savings that you've built up. And if you do this, right, this article basically says you can own $3 to $10 million after your first 7 purchases. I think that's a little, heavy. But it could be done if you found the right properties in the right locations. And that's leverage 75%. So I still think that 3 million to 10 million is a little high, but if you continue to follow the plan, you're going to get there. And maybe the 7 isn't the right number, right? Maybe it's not 4, maybe it's not 7, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 15, right? Maybe you're buying 2 every year and holding them on average for 7 to 8 years or 10 years, and then selling and then refreshing, right? So as a part of your portfolio optimization, I don't want to own 100 homes. I want to own 7 properties with 100 units, which is why so many of you put your hand up when I said 100 units versus 100 homes. So you guys are already well on your way to being awesome. Next slide, benefits. You don't have to quit your day job if you only own 7 properties, right? Can you manage 7? Sure, not 100. You also don't have to build a management company just to manage your portfolio, right? Which, Steph, you may want to do that, but most of us do not. 7 properties, you've still got diversified locations, right? You're not all in one places. Is it easier to sell one 100-unit apartment building or 100 single-family homes? Want to go to 100 closings this month? Yikes. 100 contracts. And you could sell your worst property out of those 7 each time, right? Look at your portfolio. Which one do I not like? Kick it to the curb and buy something you really like. Re-leveraging, right? You're basically cost averaging interest rates. You're cost averaging buying cost. Like you're cost averaging pretty much everything every 7 years, which is pretty awesome. Return on your equity goes down over time for a property, and your cash flow is going to go up. So consider that, right? The longer you own the property, the more money is sitting in that property being unused. So maybe in the 7s, when you look at portfolio optimization, you decide, you know what? I'm not going to sell this one this time. I'm just going to refinance, cash out, and I'm going to become 8s instead of 7s, right? There's all sorts of options. And again, that's the goal of this class, is how to get you guys to think about all the potential different factors into portfolio optimization. This model also allows you to grow into the business much like Nomad. You don't have to have 10 properties in your first year as a Nomad. You get to buy one, live in it, plan for a year to rent it, and then rent one tenant, 1 property. Now you get another year to plan to have 2. So very similar. So let's do one more. You really get to do this one. Meet Brian, AKA B-Town. For those of you that don't know, funny story, because we're almost done with class, and I'll be a little over. I was on the phone once with a tenant, and she knew my first name was B-Town, or Brian, and I've never been called B-Town before this moment. And I was asking her some screening questions, and she just decided, she's like, started responding. She's like, yeah, B-Town, that's what's up. And I was like, all right, thank you for that. So every once in a while, somebody calls me B-Town, so I figured since I was trying to make fun of James's name with Jimmy O and James Origami and couldn't find anything. So B-Town wants $25K a month in passive income, wants little work associated, already owns 100 units with condos, townhomes, single-family homes, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, 6 and 8plexes, and other small apartment buildings. Again, these are not real numbers, just in case some of you are sitting in the audience wondering. Some free and clear and some with up to 100% financing. There's Fannie Mae, there's portfolio loans, there's private lenders. Some are fixed, some have balloons, some are adjustable. Some are owned with partners, and some have multiple partners. They were purchased anywhere from 1990 to 2017, so they have varying amounts of equity. So can you imagine, from our first example, how hard this is going to be, right, to optimize and even think about all the possible scenarios. So how do you optimize this? Well, here's the list. Get started. I'm kidding. But you can see how hard that's going to be, right? If you own 100 different properties, optimizing your portfolio becomes well, let's paint some very big swatches and decide what's important. And maybe we want to get rid of some of those. So back to the Jimmy O example that we did first. Same thing. You know, how would you change, and you can think about this on your own time, how would you have changed your answers to what you thought Jimmy O should do based on that entire discussion of all the factors you consider for portfolio optimization? And that is all I have for tonight. Questions, comments, complaints, other than being 8 minutes over? I blame it on James. I blame it on coughing. Questions? No one. Come on, you got to have some questions. They got all quiet again. It's like they're doing the exercise for the 100 units. Scott.
Just personally, again, I'm torn a little bit again, whether you leverage and go out and use that dead money you're talking about, go out and buy other property, or go with Jim Yo over here, and go with the free and clear stuff. If the goal is to go free and clear, then you don't really sell.
Brian's mathematically correct. Doing leverage, at least at some level, is going to significantly improve your return. It doesn't significantly increase your risk. And so it's much better mathematically, but there is something to be said about sleeping well at night.
I sleep great, just so you know.
And knowing that there's no debt, that the market could go down a lot, and there's no risk there at all.
Yeah, and I think to that point, it's whether you put 40% down to make you sleep well at night or 100% down, it's a personal decision. But it's also, for those of you that talk to me after class, it's like, hey, should I pay this down or should I buy something else? If you're in the boat where you already believe in leverage, whatever leverage, 75% loan to value, 50%, like in my opinion, and I think James shares this opinion too, finish buying before you start paying off. Don't just, I'm going to arbitrarily pay this one off and then I'm going to buy something else. Finish your buying, then pay stuff off in the right order. And we teach a whole class on how to determine what the right order is depending on what your goals are. Use the avalanche method or the snowball method or combination of the two. But I think you mostly agree with that.
I totally do. And I would also say that don't do the $50 extra a month payment to your stuff. Stick it all in an account, and then when you have enough to actually pay off an entire loan, or to go and do a recast with your lender in order to get the benefit of having paid that off, then use that. But I do not think you should be putting an extra $25 or $50 or $100 or $200 a month toward a loan until you've got enough saved up to do the whole chunk at once.
Yeah.
Because you don't get the benefit. You lock up that equity, and now you no longer have liquidity, and you don't get the benefit of having paid off the loan.
Right.
So that's like the worst way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of doing it with a HELOC is that you can always pull the money back out, and in which case it makes sense to do it that way. Yep. So again, there are infinite possibilities, which is why we come to class and talk about this stuff all the time, because you just can't figure it all out at once.
Yeah, and the reason I'm building the software is because it will allow us to do all the computation just in mass. I will brute force do the computation, then you'll be able to see what happens if I pay off the lowest interest rate loan, or what happens if we sell off these properties and buy more, or do the 7s or 8s or 5s or whatever the model is that you're doing. I will know the answers to that shortly. When's that done? I've been working on it. So next week? I'm on vacation next week.
Oh, so you're going to do it then?
I probably will. That's how I roll.
Take a desktop on a cruise ship?
With my iPad, I can do some stuff.
I want a picture of that, Tammy. Here's James cruising through the Panama Canal, writing code. He missed the whole thing. Yeah, nice. Any other thoughts, questions? Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for teaching us class.
Sure.
We really do appreciate it.
Thank you guys for coming. Stick around for the class after the class if you have questions for James or I or anybody else.